Before we begin, take a moment to breathe. If you love stories that reveal the courage hidden behind hospital walls, hit the like button, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's begin. The alarms had barely stopped when the automatic doors of St. Mary's Hospital burst open. Nurses rushed forward, sneakers squeaking against the linoleum. A gurney rolled through the hallway, pushed by a woman in pale blue scrubs. Emily Hayes. Her eyes were sharp, calm, focused. Around her, chaos. The trauma bay filled with voices, quick commands, and the beeping of monitors. A man lay on the stretcher, blood soaking through his shirt. 2 gunshot wounds, shallow breathing. As the team worked, Emily leaned close, trying to keep him conscious. "Stay with us, sir," she whispered. His eyes flickered open for a second, glassy with pain. He tried to speak. One word made it through the static of his breath. Hayes. Then nothing. His pulse faded. The monitor flatlined. The team moved fast. Defibrillator, adrenaline, pressure on the wounds. But for Emily, time had already stopped. Her hands froze mid-air. The name echoed inside her like a memory she had tried to erase. Hayes. Her name, but not the name this hospital knew her by. Hours earlier, the day had started like any other. Emily arrived before sunrise, coffee in one hand, hair tied back in a neat bun. She had worked at St. Mary's for nearly 5 years, never late, never loud, always reliable. The kind of nurse who remembered every patient's name, every allergy, every scar. To her co-workers, she was a quiet miracle worker. To herself, she was a ghost pretending to be alive. She moved through the halls with practiced ease, checking vitals, adjusting IVs, listening more than she spoke. Dr. Carter, her supervisor, often said, "If we had 10 Emilys, I'd finally get a full night's sleep." She'd smile politely, never long enough for anyone to notice the sadness behind it. At 11:45, a call cracked through the hospital intercom. "Incoming trauma, east entrance. Multiple gunshot wounds. ETA, 2 minutes." The tone of her day shifted instantly. Emily ran to prepare the trauma room. Gloves, saline, gauze, suction, airway kit. When the doors opened, she saw the helicopter outside, its blades slicing through the sky. The patient came in limp and pale, his uniform torn. Something in the pattern of his injuries felt too familiar. The precision, the angle, military. She didn't know how she knew that, or maybe she did. She just didn't want to remember why. When she held his wrist to check for a pulse, his hand twitched and his lips parted. "Captain Hayes," he whispered. The words barely existed, more breath than sound, but they hit her like a bullet. Her knees almost gave out. The room tilted. She stepped back, mumbling, I need air." Dr. Carter noticed. "Emily, are you okay?" "I'm fine," she lied, walking out before he could stop her. In the corridor, she leaned against the wall, her breath coming in shallow bursts. She pressed her hands to her face. The smell of antiseptic, the buzz of fluorescent lights, everything felt too loud. That name, Captain Hayes, was from another life, one she had buried 8 years ago under a new name, a new license, a new face in a place that asked no questions. By evening, the hospital had quieted. Rain tapped against the glass doors. Then, a pair of dark SUVs pulled up outside. Men in black suits stepped out, raincoats brushing against their knees, badges clipped to their belts. They entered with the kind of authority that needed no introduction. The front desk nurse looked up nervously. "Can I help you?" One of them flipped open a badge. "FBI. We're looking for someone named Captain Emily Hayes." The nurse blinked. "Captain? We only have a nurse by that name." The agent exchanged a glance with his partner. "Then we've found her." Within minutes, the hospital's intercom came alive again. Code Orange. All staff remain in assigned zones. Security to level 2. Dr. Carter was in the middle of charting when the announcement hit. He saw movement near the elevators. Security officers, then the FBI. His stomach turned. He rushed toward the front desk. "What's going on?" An agent turned to him. "We're looking for a woman who works here." "But she's not who she says she is." "Who are you talking about?" Carter asked, though deep down, he already knew. Downstairs in the staff locker room, Emily opened her locker and stared at the ID badge hanging inside. The name printed on it, Emily Hayes, RN, felt like a mask that had just started to peel away. She could hear the announcement faintly echoing through the vents. She whispered to herself, "They found me." Footsteps thundered in the hallway. Voices, radios, the sound of boots. The agents were closing in. She grabbed her jacket, heart pounding, and looked around the small room. There was nowhere to run. Only the steady hum of fluorescent lights and the sound of her pulse in her ears. Outside, the FBI surrounded the entrance. Rain turned the pavement into a mirror of flashing lights. Inside, patients whispered. Nurses froze mid-step, and Dr. Carter stood between his duty and his instinct to protect her. Emily inhaled deeply, forcing herself to stand straight. For 8 years, she had lived like a shadow, saving others while hiding her own wounds. But shadows don't stay hidden forever. That night, the hospital would learn that their quietest nurse once wore a different uniform, and the name they thought they knew was the one she had spent her whole life trying to forget. The hospital, once a place of quiet healing, had turned into a maze of whispers and locked doors. Security guards moved through corridors with uneasy precision, their radios crackling. No one said Emily's name aloud, but everyone felt it hanging in the air like static. Dr. Carter watched the agents from a distance as they spoke to the hospital administrator. They had the kind of posture that didn't invite conversation. 2 men in dark suits, wet shoes leaving small prints on the tile. He heard the older one say, "Captain Emily Hayes, she's here. She's been here for years." Carter felt his stomach twist. Captain. He had seen Emily handle trauma, death, panic. She never flinched. Her precision had always felt almost military, but he never thought twice. Now that word made it make sense in the worst possible way. He walked down the hallway, pretending to check a chart, trying to listen. One of the agents turned to him. "You're Dr. Carter, right? Head of emergency?" "Yes. What's this about?" The younger agent, Pierce, looked him in the eye. "You've been working with her for 5 years. You're telling me you never suspected who she really was?" "Suspected what?" Carter asked, voice firm but cracking slightly. The agent handed him a photo. Emily, years younger, in a military uniform, standing in front of a tent with dust swirling behind her. Same eyes, same composure, only colder. "This is Captain Hayes," Pierce said. "United States Army Medical Corps. Vanished after filing an internal report that exposed corruption in a classified pharmaceutical operation. Since then, she's been off the grid." Carter stared at the photo. "If she disappeared, maybe she had a reason." Pierce replied, "She did. People like her usually do, but reasons don't erase records." Down the hall, in a supply closet lit by a single flickering bulb, Emily sat on the floor, her knees pulled close. Her breath came slow and steady, military breathing, controlled panic. She took out an old flip phone from her bag, the kind that could still work without a SIM card. Her thumb hovered over a number. She pressed it. Static. Then a flat tone. Disconnected. The last lifeline to the past. Gone. She closed her eyes. For a moment, the hum of the fluorescent light faded, and another sound crept in. Wind, engines, shouting. The past. "Captain Hayes, we're running out of supplies." The voice echoed across a field of sand and dust. Emily turned, not Emily then, but Captain Hayes, sweat streaking through dirt on her face. Around her, soldiers lay on stretchers moaning. She yelled into a radio, "We need morphine now." A voice crackled back, "Supplies are gone. Shipment was rerouted." "Rerouted where?" she demanded. But the radio went dead. She looked toward a truck convoy disappearing over the hill. Crates stamped with the medical symbol. Boxes she knew were filled with life-saving drugs. She felt rage rising like heat. Later that night, she followed the trucks. What she saw changed everything. Men she knew unloading supplies into private vehicles, unmarked, guarded by officers above her rank. She took photos, notes, filed a report the next day. The next night, the camp exploded. 3 medics died. The message was clear. Back in the present, Emily's hand trembled as she wiped a tear that refused to fall. She wasn't crying for herself. She was crying because the same kind of power that stole medicine from dying soldiers was now walking through the same hallways she worked in, pretending to protect. Outside, Agent Monroe leaned against the nurse's station, eyes cold but not cruel. "She was one of ours," he said to Carter. "And she ran because she didn't have a choice." Carter frowned. "So, what do you want from her now?" Monroe hesitated. "We just need to talk to her." "Talk to her," Carter repeated, voice sharp. "That's not what men with guns say." Monroe didn't respond. He just looked down the corridor, where a security guard whispered into a radio. Emily slipped out of the closet and down the back staircase. Her sneakers barely made a sound. She knew the hospital like a soldier knew a battlefield. The blind spots in the cameras, the timing of the elevator doors, the hallway that led to the basement. For years she'd memorized every exit, not because she planned to run, but because she didn't trust safety. Not really. Not anymore. She reached the lower level, where the sterile smell turned into metal and dust. The maintenance hallway stretched before her. Dark. Cold. As she moved, she heard a voice over the hospital speakers. "Code Orange remains in effect. All staff report any unusual activity." Emily froze. Her hand shook. She pressed herself against the wall, hearing boots above her. Every instinct screamed to run, but she couldn't. Not yet. Not until she knew who the man on the gurney was. The one who had said her name. Back upstairs, Carter entered her locker room. The FBI had already been there. Her locker was open, contents scattered. Uniform, photo of a child she once treated. A small notebook with neat handwriting. He flipped it open. Every page was filled with dosage notes, schedules, patient progress charts. At the very end, in faded ink, one line stood out. "You can't save them all, but you can try." He felt a lump in his throat. Whatever she had done, whoever she used to be, she was still saving people. He closed the notebook and slipped it into his pocket before the agents could see it. Outside, the hospital lights dimmed slightly as a storm rolled in. Rain hit the glass like static. Monroe stood at the main door, radio to his ear. "We've got movement on sublevel 3, a voice said. "She's heading toward the east stairwell." "Copy," Monroe replied, nodding to his partner. "Let's end this quietly." Emily reached the end of the maintenance hall and tried the side door, locked. She took a breath and turned around. Two silhouettes filled the far end of the corridor. Agents. Their flashlights cut through the dark. "Captain Hayes," one called out. "It's over." She stepped back slowly, hands half raised, eyes burning. "You don't know what you're doing," she said softly. "We're not here to hurt you," Monroe replied. "Then why are you armed?" No one answered. The hum of the lights, the drip of a leaking pipe, the only sounds between them. Emily looked down at her own trembling hands. For years, those hands had stitched torn flesh, started IV lines, resuscitated the dying. The same hands now felt foreign, dangerous. "I saved people," she whispered. "And you think I ran because I was guilty. I ran because I told the truth." Monroe took a step forward. "Then tell it again." The words hit her harder than the gunshots ever did. She closed her eyes, chest rising with a heavy breath. Somewhere deep inside, a door she'd sealed long ago creaked open. The agents lowered their weapons slightly. She looked up, eyes wet but steady. "If I tell you what really happened," she said, "you won't be the one sleeping tonight." The hallway filled with the echo of thunder from outside. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. Somewhere in the distance, a code alarm blared. Another patient, another emergency. The world above kept turning, unaware that beneath the hospital, a ghost from a forgotten war had just been found. And for the first time in years, Captain Emily Hayes stopped running. The interrogation room was small, sterile, and too cold for comfort. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering every few seconds as if nervous themselves. Emily sat on one side of a metal table, hands clasped, wrists red from the zip ties they'd used to bring her in. Across from her, Agent Monroe leaned back in his chair, his face half lit, half shadow. He wasn't aggressive. He didn't need to be. Silence was doing all the work. "Do you know why we're here, Captain Hayes?" he asked finally. His voice was calm, the kind of calm that can only belong to someone who's seen everything once before. She looked at him for a long moment. "You wouldn't be asking if you didn't already know," she said. Her voice was steady, but inside her chest, her heart thudded like a slow drum. "You found me. You know what I did." "We know what you said you did," Monroe replied. "But we also know 3 people ended up dead the same night you filed your report. The Army called it an accident. You called it a cover-up." Emily's eyes didn't flinch. "And which one do you believe?" Monroe didn't answer. He turned off the recorder for a moment, leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You've been living as a nurse for 5 years, saving lives. You could have disappeared anywhere. Why here?" "Because hospitals are honest," she said. "Pain comes in, truth goes out. No ranks, no orders, just people trying not to die." For a moment, Monroe said nothing. There was something in her tone. Not defiance, not guilt, just exhaustion. The kind that comes from carrying too many ghosts. In another part of the hospital, Dr. Carter stood at the nurse's station, pretending to chart, while trying to catch bits of conversation from passing agents. They had locked down half the building. Patients were nervous. The media had started to circle. Carter rubbed his temples. He didn't believe Emily was dangerous. But he knew whatever she was hiding wasn't small, and it was now sitting in his hospital. Back in the room, Monroe pressed a button and a low beep filled the silence. "For the record," he said, "you're being questioned in relation to Operation Goliath. Do you deny being stationed in Kandahar in 2016? Emily's eyes flickered. The name was a wound. "No, I was there." "Do you deny that morphine shipments under your supervision went missing during your command?" She leaned forward, voice low but sharp. "I don't deny it. I reported it, and then they burned the evidence." "You think I disappeared because I was guilty?" "I disappeared because the people who were guilty made sure everyone who knew the truth stopped breathing." Monroe didn't look surprised. "That's a heavy accusation." "It's not an accusation," she said softly. "It's a confession of what they did." Flashback. Sand, sun, rotors, the smell of dust and diesel fuel. She's standing in the heat, watching crates being loaded onto trucks marked with medical insignia. The label says, "For base supply, humanitarian use." But she knows the route doesn't lead to hospitals. It leads to black markets. Her commanding officer, Colonel Rains, stands nearby, smoking. "You didn't see anything, Captain," he says without looking at her. "We keep the reports clean, the mission running. Everyone gets what they need." She remembers the way her voice trembled. "Except the soldiers who die because of it." He smiled without warmth. "You're learning how the world works." And then, the explosion. The camp lit up like sunrise. Screaming, smoke, chaos. Her last memory of that night was blood soaking through her uniform and the sound of her own name shouted over a radio, fading in static. The sound of the hospital's air conditioner brought her back. Her hands were shaking now, but her eyes were hard. Monroe had turned the recorder back on. "So you ran," he said. "I ran because staying meant becoming one of them," she answered. "I wasn't going to patch up another man dying for someone's profit." Outside the room, Pierce stood watching through the one-way glass. "She's good," he muttered. "Either she believes this, or she's rehearsed it for years." Monroe sighed. "She's not lying. I've seen liars. They look away from their ghosts." She's staring right at hers. Suddenly, a knock on the door interrupted them. Carter stepped in, holding a chart. "She needs food and fluids," he said, glaring at the agents. "If you keep her in there much longer, she'll collapse. You want answers, keep her alive first." Monroe nodded reluctantly. 5 minutes. When Carter handed her a bottle of water, their eyes met. No words, but understanding passed between them. She whispered, "You shouldn't be here, and you shouldn't either," he murmured back. After Carter left, Monroe leaned closer. "Tell me about the man who said your name today. The one who came in with gunshot wounds." Emily's face stiffened. "He was one of mine." "One of your soldiers?" She nodded. "Corporal Ryan Beckett. He was with me that night. He kept the files. He said if anything happened, he'd hide them somewhere safe. And you think that's why he came here? I think he came to tell me someone found them first. Monroe exhaled, rubbing his face. This just keeps getting bigger. You have no idea, Emily said quietly. Meanwhile, in the trauma unit, Ryan Beckett's condition was critical. He hadn't regained consciousness. But the nurses found something tucked in the lining of his jacket. A memory card sealed in tape, small enough to fit under a button. Dr. Carter noticed it before anyone else did. He slipped it into his pocket. He didn't know why. Instinct, maybe. The kind that tells you a story isn't done yet. Back in the room, Monroe's phone buzzed. A message from his superior. Stand down. Transfer subject to federal facility. No further questioning. His jaw tightened. Orders. Always orders. He looked at Emily. They're moving you, he said. To where? Somewhere I can't follow. Her expression didn't change. Then you're part of it too. I don't take sides, he said quietly. Everyone takes sides, she whispered. Even silence is a side. The door opened. 2 uniformed officers entered. Transfer time. Monroe hesitated, then slipped her something small under the table. His card. If you remember anything else, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, call me. They led her away in handcuffs. She didn't look back. But as she walked past Carter in the hallway, her eyes caught his for 1 second, and he saw it. The soldier behind the nurse. The guilt, the grief, the fire still burning underneath it all. Thunder rumbled outside. The storm had reached its peak. Carter stood alone in the hallway long after they were gone, hand still in his pocket, feeling the edge of the memory card against his fingers. Whatever it contained, it was the key. Not just to her past, but to what was coming. And somewhere, deep in the ICU, a heart monitor beeped weakly. Ryan Beckett was still alive. Rain fell like static across the ambulance bay as the federal transport van idled under the overhang. 2 uniformed officers stood by the rear doors, soaked, impatient. Inside, Emily sat chained to the bench, wrists cuffed in front of her. Orange light from the dashboard casting long shadows across her face. The sound of the rain hitting the metal roof was relentless, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. She focused on it, counting the beats, slowing her breathing. That old discipline never left her. Agent Monroe stood near the doorway, arms crossed, water dripping from his coat. He hated the order that had come down. Something about it felt wrong. Too fast. Too clean. Transfers like this didn't happen at midnight during a storm. He approached one of the men near the van. Who authorized this move? Director's office, the officer said, not meeting his eyes. Monroe frowned. That's funny. I just spoke to the director an hour ago. The man said nothing. Inside the van, Emily looked out the small grated window. She could see Monroe arguing, his gestures sharp, his voice rising over the wind. The driver turned slightly, one hand resting near his weapon. Her instincts screamed. Something's off. And then it happened fast. A crack of thunder. A second later, the flash of muzzle fire. One officer went down. The other shouted, returning fire. Monroe ducked behind the van, drawing his gun. "Federal agent, drop your weapon!" he yelled. But the attackers weren't outsiders. They were the transfer team themselves. Emily kicked the van door hard, twice, until it swung open. She rolled out, cuffs still on, hitting the wet pavement. One of the fake officers turned toward her, weapon raised. Monroe fired first. The man fell. Silence. Just the rain again, heavy and merciless. Monroe ran to her. "You okay?" She nodded, eyes wild. "They weren't yours." "I know," he said, breathing hard. "Someone wants you gone before you can talk." He cut her cuffs with a spare key and handed her his coat. "Come on. We have to move before backup arrives, before whoever sent them figures out they failed." They ran across the parking lot, sirens beginning to wail in the distance. The storm swallowed them as they slipped into the shadows near the maintenance wing. Back inside the hospital, Dr. Carter sat in his office, staring at his computer screen. The lights flickered once, twice, as if mirroring the storm outside. The memory card he'd found was plugged into a small reader. For a moment, it seemed blank. No files. No folders. Then a faint click, and a directory appeared. Goliath Op Logs. His pulse quickened. He clicked one. A video opened. Grainy, low-resolution footage from a military base. Men in uniform, unloading crates. The audio was distorted, but a voice came through, calm, authoritative. Shipment rerouted to civilian depot. Authorization by Rains. Then another clip. This time Emily was visible. Younger, angry, confronting someone. "You're killing them," she shouted. "They're dying because you're selling their meds." The man off-screen responded coldly. "This conversation never happened, Captain." Carter leaned back, heart racing. It was evidence. Real, undeniable evidence. The kind that could destroy careers, maybe even institutions. He copied the files to an external drive, knowing it might cost him everything. A knock on his door startled him. It was Pierce, the younger FBI agent. His expression was unreadable. "We lost the transport," he said flatly. "What do you mean, lost it?" Carter asked. "Shots fired. 2 officers down. Hayes and Monroe are gone." Carter tried to act surprised, but inside, relief flickered like light through glass. Pierce's eyes lingered on him. "If she tries to contact you, Doctor, you call me. Immediately." Carter nodded, keeping his voice even. "Of course." When the agent left, Carter exhaled shakily. He closed the laptop, pocketed the drive, and whispered to the empty room, "Be careful, Emily." Miles away, under an overpass on the edge of town, Monroe parked an unmarked sedan. Emily sat beside him, wrapped in his coat, watching the rain through the windshield. The adrenaline had worn off. Exhaustion crept in. "You could have handed me over," she said. Monroe looked straight ahead. "I don't work for whoever sent that team. I work for the truth, and right now, that's buried under a lot of dirt." She turned to him, voice quiet, but firm. "Then dig fast. They're not going to stop." He nodded. "Tell me about Rains." Her face hardened. "He was my commanding officer. He ran the logistics for medical supply routes in Kandahar. He was also selling half of it to private buyers, using soldiers to cover it up. When I reported it, he erased the files. But Ryan, Corporal Beckett, backed them up. That's what he brought to me tonight. He must have known they were coming for him." Monroe's jaw clenched. "So the files prove the government's own people were stealing from their wounded." "They prove more than that," Emily said. "They prove Rains was connected to a civilian contractor, Arkan Bio. They turned stolen morphine into synthetic research stock. Profit over pain. That's the system I ran from." Monroe leaned back, rubbing his forehead. "This isn't just corruption, it's treason." Emily gave a bitter laugh. "Treason only matters when it's the small people who do it." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the storm. In the distance, sirens wailed again, faint and restless. Emily closed her eyes. "He's still alive, isn't he?" she asked suddenly. "Who?" "Ryan. The soldier they brought in." Monroe hesitated. "Last I heard, yes. But he's critical." Her voice softened. "Then I'm going back." He turned to her, startled. "You can't. They'll have agents crawling all over that place." "I'm not leaving him," she said, her tone unshakable. "He saved me once. I owe him his life." Monroe stared at her. The same resolve that had made her a soldier now burned in her eyes again. "You're insane," he said quietly. "Maybe," she replied. "But I'm right." Back at St. Mary's, the ICU lights glowed dim against the storm. Carter stood by Ryan Beckett's bed, watching the weak rhythm of the monitor. The man's chest rose and fell shallowly. Carter whispered, "Who are you, really?" Ryan's fingers twitched. His lips parted, a single word slipping out. "Hayes." And just then, a shadow passed the window of the ICU door. Carter looked up and froze. Standing there, drenched, hood pulled low, eyes tired but burning with purpose, was Emily. He stepped forward, disbelief in his voice. "How?" She raised a finger to her lips. "Not now." Monroe appeared behind her, scanning the hallway. "We've got 10 minutes, tops," he said under his breath. Carter gestured toward Ryan. "He's stable, but barely. Whatever you're planning, do it fast." Emily took the soldier's hand. "It's me, Ryan. You did good. You got it here." His eyelids fluttered. They know." "I know," she whispered. "Rest now. I'll finish it." Monroe watched the monitors flicker. "We have to move." Emily nodded, her voice breaking for the first time. "Just one more minute." She turned to Carter. "Doctor, there's a drive in your office. Keep it safe. If anything happens to me—" He cut her off. "Don't finish that sentence." The sound of boots echoed down the hallway. More agents, flashlights cutting through the dark. Monroe pulled his gun. Emily grabbed Carter's wrist, eyes fierce. "Whatever happens, don't let them twist the story." And then the alarms began again. The truth was no longer buried. It was bleeding back into the world. The hospital lights dimmed as power rerouted to emergency mode. Generators kicked in with a low hum, painting the hallways in a sickly yellow glow. The storm outside hadn't stopped. Thunder rolled above like an angry drum, and the rain beat against the windows hard enough to sound like static. Emily stood in the ICU beside Ryan's bed, her hand still wrapped around his. Monroe peered through the blinds, scanning the parking lot. Dozens of dark vehicles were arriving. He turned to her. "We're out of time." Carter entered quietly, his white coat now soaked from the rain he'd run through moments earlier. "They've surrounded the East Wing," he said, breathless. "Every exit is covered." Monroe nodded grimly. "They're not here for an arrest anymore." Emily looked up at him, eyes steady. "They're here to erase what's left of us." Carter's mind raced. "I copied the files," he said in a low voice. "They're safe, hidden off-site." Monroe's eyes widened. "You what? You think I could just watch this unfold and do nothing?" The doctor replied, "I've seen enough to know who the criminals are." Before they could say more, a voice cracked through the hospital intercom. Calm, commanding, familiar. "This is Colonel Rains. Captain Hayes, we need to talk." Emily froze. The voice was like a ghost crawling through the walls. She whispered, "He's here." Monroe stiffened. "You said he was retired." She shook her head. "Men like him never retire. They just change uniforms." Rains's voice echoed again, smooth and cold. "You have something that belongs to the United States government. Step into the main hall, unarmed, and no one gets hurt." Emily laughed under her breath. Sharp, bitter. That's the same thing he said before he burned the camp. Monroe checked his weapon. "We hold them off long enough for you to get out. The back stairwell might still be clear." "No," Emily said firmly. "If I run now, he wins again. I'm done hiding." Carter swallowed hard. "Emily," she looked at him, eyes soft but unwavering. "I've spent years pretending to heal others, so I could forget what I couldn't fix. Maybe this is how I finally stop pretending." She pulled off her hospital ID and let it fall to the floor. The sound was small but final. Monroe watched her. The soldier had fully returned. They moved carefully down the hall, past flickering lights and darkened rooms. The hospital, usually filled with the hum of life, now felt like a battleground. Emily's footsteps were silent, but her heart thundered in her chest. Every corner could hold a gun. Every sound could mean the end. They reached the main lobby. Soldiers in tactical gear filled the space, rifles raised. Rains stood in the center, tall, gray-haired, his uniform crisp, his eyes hard. He looked at her the way a wolf looks at the lamb that bit back. "Captain Hayes," he said smoothly. "Still playing nurse, I see. I'll give you credit. Hiding in plain sight is clever." Emily didn't blink. "You're still stealing in plain sight, Colonel." A smirk twitched at the edge of his mouth. Big words from someone who deserted her post. "I didn't desert," she said. "I refused to be part of your cover-up." Monroe stepped slightly forward. "Colonel Rains, stand down. You're under investigation." Rains turned his gaze to him, amused. "Agent Monroe, isn't it? You think your badge means something here?" "I am the investigation." Without warning, one of Rains's men raised his weapon. Monroe fired first. The sound split the silence, echoing through the lobby. Then chaos. Shouting. Glass shattering. The wail of sirens. Carter ducked behind a reception desk as bullets tore through the air. Nurses screamed from distant hallways. Emily pulled Monroe down behind a column. "We can't win this fight," he said through gritted teeth. "Then we don't fight," she replied. "We expose them." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small drive. A backup copy Carter had given her. "This has everything," she said. "Shipments, transfers, signatures. If we upload it to the hospital network, it'll go public before they can stop it." Monroe looked around, desperate. "The server room's 2 floors down. Then we move." They crawled along the wall, staying low. Raines barked orders to his men, unaware that his prey had slipped behind him. Blood stained the floor where bullets had hit. Emily's hands were slick with sweat, her breathing shallow. She wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of not finishing what she started. They reached the stairwell door. Carter was already there, holding it open. "Go," he whispered. "I'll slow them down." Emily shook her head. "You'll be killed." He smiled faintly. "Maybe. But at least I'll die doing something honest." Monroe hesitated, then nodded. "You're a brave man, Doctor." Carter's eyes hardened. "No. I'm just tired of patching up the damage other men cause." He stepped out into the hallway, yelling, "She's not here!" The soldiers turned toward him, shouting. Gunfire erupted again. The sound faded as the stairwell door slammed shut behind Emily and Monroe. They ran down the stairs, lungs burning, hearts pounding. When they burst into the server room, the hum of machines filled the air. Emily rushed to the main terminal. "Cover me," she said. Monroe took position near the door. She plugged in the drive. The screen flickered. Lines of code scrolled by. "Come on," she whispered. The files began to upload, slowly, painfully. 12%. 28. 47. Monroe yelled, "They're coming!" Bullets tore through the door. Sparks flew. Emily ducked. 73%. A flashbang rolled into the room. Monroe kicked it away, but the explosion still blinded them. He fired blindly toward the doorway. "Almost there," she shouted. 90, 97, 100. The screen blinked. Upload complete. She ripped out the drive just as the door burst open. Raines stood there, gun in hand, face twisted with rage. "You think you can destroy me?" he growled. Emily stepped forward, unarmed, eyes fierce. "No. You destroyed yourself." Raines raised his gun, but Monroe fired first. The bullet hit his shoulder, spinning him back. He dropped his weapon, staggering. For a second, everything stopped. The rain, the noise, even time itself. Raines looked at her, disbelief flickering across his face. "You'll never win," he hissed. Emily's voice was calm. "I already did. The world's watching now." She pressed the hospital alarm panel beside her. The system lit up red. Emergency broadcast active. Across every monitor in St. Mary's, every security screen, every patient waiting room TV. The files began to play. Footage, reports, signatures, the truth. Outside, agents poured in, responding to the chaos. Raines was dragged away, shouting, blood staining his uniform. Emily leaned against the wall, trembling, breath heavy. Monroe grabbed her arm. "You did it," he said. She shook her head softly. "We did it." Carter appeared at the doorway, limping, his coat torn but alive. "You're not getting rid of me that easily," he said, smiling weakly. For the first time in years, Emily let herself breathe. Really breathe. The weight that had crushed her for nearly a decade finally lifted. Monroe looked at her. "So what now, Captain Hayes?" She met his gaze. "Now I stop being Captain Hayes." Outside, the storm began to break. The first rays of morning light crept through the shattered windows, touching the blood-streaked floor with gold. The truth was out. The war was finally over. The sun rose over St. Mary's Hospital like it hadn't in years. Soft, hesitant, golden light filtering through broken windows and rain-wet glass. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered. The smell of gunpowder, the sharp tang of antiseptic, the quiet hum of machines that never stopped working. For the first time since the chaos began, the building was still. Emily sat on the hospital roof, wrapped in a gray blanket, IV still taped to her arm. Her face was pale, bruised at the temple, but her eyes were awake, painfully awake. Down below, flashing lights painted the asphalt in red and blue. Paramedics moved like ghosts through the wreckage of the night. Somewhere inside, Monroe was giving statements to a cluster of grim-faced federal officials. Carter was being patched up in the trauma bay. And Colonel Raines was in custody, silent, bleeding, surrounded by the very uniforms he had once commanded. She closed her eyes and breathed in the damp morning air. It smelled like freedom and regret. A door creaked open behind her. Dr. Carter stepped onto the roof, his arm in a sling, a gauze bandage peeking from under his sleeve. He carried 2 cups of coffee, one shaking slightly in his hand. "You look like hell," he said quietly, sitting down beside her. She smiled faintly. "I've been worse." Hard to imagine. She took the cup from him. The warmth seeped through her fingers. For a while they didn't speak, just sat, listening to the city waking up below them. Carter finally broke the silence. The upload went viral. News networks picked it up within hours. They're calling it the biggest military corruption leak since the 80s. Emily nodded slowly. "Good. Let them see what their heroes did." He glanced at her. "You're one of the heroes too, you know." She laughed softly, bitterly. "Heroes don't run. They don't hide in hospitals pretending to be someone else." He shook his head. "Heroes survive long enough to tell the truth. You did both." She turned her gaze to the horizon. "Ryan? He's stable," Carter said. "He's going to make it." Emily's eyes softened. "He was just a kid when I met him. I told him to believe in the system. He still did, even after it betrayed him. And now?" She sighed. "Now I don't know what to believe in." Carter leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Believe in people like you. That's enough." Below them, Monroe exited the building, jacket slung over one shoulder. He looked up once, meeting Emily's eyes from the ground. He gave a small nod. Respect, gratitude, maybe even something unspoken. She returned it, a quiet acknowledgement that neither of them would ever be the same again. Hours later, the hospital returned to its strange version of normal. Patients were transferred, hallways cleaned, bullet holes patched over with fresh paint. But some stains never fade completely. Not from walls, not from memory. Emily walked slowly through the ICU one last time. The nurses whispered as she passed, unsure if they should thank her or fear her. She paused by Ryan's bed. His eyes were open now, faintly alert. He managed a small smile. "Captain," he whispered. She smiled back. "Not anymore, soldier." "Ma'am," he said weakly. "We did it, didn't we?" Her voice trembled. "Yeah, Ryan, we did." He squeezed her hand, eyes closing again, peace settling over his face. For him, the war was finally over. She left the hospital quietly. No uniform, no ID, just a name she wasn't sure she wanted to keep. The sky had cleared completely. Pigeons crossed the morning light, and for a fleeting second, the world seemed clean again. 2 weeks later, a small diner off Route 16. The place smelled like old coffee and fried eggs. Emily sat at a corner booth, wearing a dark hoodie, hair tucked under a cap. The TV above the counter played a news report. Former Army Colonel Samuel Raines has been charged with multiple counts of fraud, racketeering, and manslaughter in connection with Operation Goliath. She watched quietly as the anchor's voice droned on. Photos flashed, her own face among them, labeled whistleblower. She turned the volume down, half a smile tugging at her lips. The waitress poured her another coffee. "Rough morning?" she asked kindly. Emily looked up, eyes distant but alive. "No, just long overdue." Her phone buzzed once, a message from Monroe. "You did good, Captain. Stay safe." She typed back, "Not a captain anymore." Then, after a moment, "Just Emily." She turned off the phone, slipped it into her pocket, and watched the road through the diner window. Cars passing, people living, unaware of the war that had just ended in their name. For the first time in years, she felt weightless. Not because she had escaped, but because she had finally stopped running. Later that evening, as the sun sank behind the horizon, Emily found herself standing at the edge of a quiet park. Children played in the distance, their laughter carrying on the breeze. She closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. The same way she used to listen to soldiers laughing around the fire before missions that would never end. Carter's words echoed in her mind. Heroes survive long enough to tell the truth. Maybe that was her mission now. Not to fight, not to hide, but to remind others that truth has a heartbeat too. It may slow, falter, even bleed, but it never dies quietly. She reached into her pocket and felt something. A small military pin, worn and tarnished. The last piece of her old life. For a long moment, she turned it between her fingers. Then she dropped it into the grass and walked away without looking back. The wind caught the pin, rolling it slightly, sunlight glinting off the metal. Somewhere far behind her, the monitors in St. Mary's beeped in steady rhythm. Proof that life, despite everything, goes on. And in the distance, a voice from a radio newscast carried faintly through the air. Captain Emily Hayes, or as she's known now, Nurse Emily Hart, has been cleared of all charges. Her testimony will be used to reform military medical oversight programs nationwide. The words faded into static. Emily kept walking, the light stretching long before her, the world finally hers again. Truth hurts. Silence kills. But courage heals.